Right, so I'll go ahead.
Yes, great.
All right, hello folks. Thanks for attending, and I'm going to introduce myself. My slide does not have my name on it, but I will show my name at the end of the program. My name is Betsy Arnson. I work at the Canadian-American Center at the University of Maine. And I would like to tell you two things. One is a little bit like the Shameless Commerce Division. On our website at the University of Maine, umaine.edu, Can-Am, C-A-N-A-M, /publications. We have two maps. And at the end of this program, I'll show you what the maps are and tell you a little bit more about them and how you can get them. And one is the Shameless Commerce Division part is that you'd have to purchase it to get it. But the other one is online, and I'll show you how to get there. The other thing I want to tell you is that as a professional development provider for Canadian content and Canadian studies in the United States, we offer summer teachers institutes in Canada, usually in Montreal and Quebec City. We will be running those again in 2022, and we'll be doing something virtually this summer, and so stay tuned for that. Today's topic is 2,200 miles of Canada-U.S. shared water collaborations and issues. The Great Lakes and their watersheds and their connecting rivers and their channels make up the largest surface freshwater system in the world. They're so big, they can be seen from outer space. And this is a slide, 2012 photo taken from the International Space Station. And down here, these horizontal lines are the Finger Lakes in upstate New York. And in the foreground, we can see Lake Ontario, and Lake Erie is present. We can see Lake Huron, and then possibly this is Lake Michigan, and we have some cloud cover. So big they can be seen from outer space. The U.S.-Canada international border cuts through this water system. Or to change the perspective, we can say that straddling the U.S.-Canada boundary are the Great Lakes and their watershed. Either way, it's currently inhabited by about 40 million people, Americans and Canadians added together for that 40 million. This represents the water supply for 25% of Canada's population and 10% of America's population. On this slide, looking at the Great Lakes and the kind of pink purple color around it, that represents the Great Lakes and their watershed. This map also shows the St. Lawrence River and its watershed. That's the colored tan orange up the St. Lawrence River. And the Great Lakes flow through the St. Lawrence River to the Atlantic Ocean. The 1942 children's book about a Cree boy who carves a wooden canoe with a figure and names him Paddle to the Sea tells the story of, let's see if I have a slide on that, hang on. Yeah, it tells the story of the this carving floating through the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean and provides an excellent geographic and historical picture of the region. In the links I can provide you later, I can get you a link to a National Film Board film adaptation of this book. It's about 25 minutes long. The Great Lakes are one of the world's largest surface freshwater ecosystems, representing 20% of the world's freshwater. The lakes, I should say it this way. There is fresh water frozen in the glaciers, and this is not counting that. Okay. The lakes constitute the largest inland water transportation system in the world. And these lakes are used for producing hydropower, and they have played and continue to play an important role in the economic development of both the United States and Canada. Both the United States and Canada need and use the Great Lakes. And the Canadian and U.S. partnership is forged by their shared geography, similar values, common interests, deep connections, and multi-layered economic ties. A little bit of information about this black dashed line in the slide, which represents the border between our two countries. And that is when you go to Lake Superior and look left, it's pretty much on the 45th parallel. And that was chosen because the water drains to the Hudson Bay at that point and drains down below the 45th parallel into the U.S., which is why the 45th parallel was chosen as a border line. Canada and the United States participate in the largest trading relationship in the world, and pre-COVID, about 500,000 people crossed the shared border each day for business, pleasure, or to maintain family ties. One of the largest border crossings, I have a PowerPoint here, yeah. One of the larger border crossings here is Detroit, and we have another one here. These are large border crossings as far as volumes of people going back and forth. Again, pre-COVID, 500,000 every day. A secure and efficient flow of goods and people across the border is vital to both countries' economic competitiveness and prosperity. At this time, as we speak right now, which is October in 2020, the border is closed for casual crossings. However, families may cross if they quarantine for 2 weeks, sequestered. They will be checked on by government officials for their 2 weeks. And there are other provisions for auto industry manufacturers and other business connections. There are provisions made for their crossings as well at this time. But the border essentially is closed just now. Canadians and Americans share the same environment. They breathe the same air, they drink the same water. They share the same responsibility to ensure that future generations have a safe, clean, and healthy continent. Working together, the two countries address shared environmental challenges, such as energy requirements, parks, national parks, wildlife protection, fisheries, stock management, air quality, water quality, and climate change. So throwing in here an interesting slide. This is how the Great Lakes were formed when the glaciers receded about 10,000 years ago. So these are a quadrant of illustrations. 14,000 years ago is the upper left-hand corner, where the glaciers are just receding. International borders are complex. They are actual places, just as regions and provinces and states are places. So the international borders is a physical place in geography. If you no doubt you've crossed borders before, particularly in North America, and you can see the markers. Borders involving water add another dimension of complexity. For Canada and the United States, their shared waters are more than a river delineating two countries, like the St. John River dividing Maine or the U.S. from New Brunswick for Canada. The boundary between our two countries totals 5,500 miles and includes 2,200 miles of boundary waters from the Bay of Fundy, which is over here, to the Salish Sea in the Pacific. What does a water boundary look like? Okay, here's a picture of one near me. I'm broadcasting from near Bar Harbor, Maine. I'm in Ellsworth. This is northern Maine. This is Maine on the left and New Brunswick on the right. And I've been on this river in a canoe, and I was guided out. Someone was taking me on a ride, and I was asking if we had to pick an imaginary line halfway between the two shores and just stay there and never go past this imaginary line in the middle. That's not the case. The boundaries of this river and the little islands in this river change every year depending on silt and waves and different reasons why it changes slightly every year. But in any case, you're welcome to navigate the entire river with your canoe width-wise. However, we were instructed to never touch the bow of the canoe on the opposite shore in Canada, New Brunswick, because it would require the nice neighbors with their swing set to run to their phone and report that you did this. And then security people would have to come down, the border security would have to come down and investigate. So you're welcome to be in this river, just don't look as though you're landing. There are islands in the middle of this river, so if you needed to land somewhere for some different reason, you would be able to. So again, a water boundary, and this is Maine and New Brunswick. So this session will provide an overview of the geography, environment, law, and policy that 8 states, 2 provinces, 2 nations have agreed to in their shared water boundaries, and in matters of controlling and stewarding 20% of the world's available fresh surface water along the longest border shared by any 2 countries in the world. Water and power have been central to the Canada-U.S. relationship. Before the 20th century, the systems of rivers, lakes, and canals that tied eastern ports to the interior of the continent structured the framework of North American political and economic development. While American settlement pressed westward along rivers like the Ohio, let me go back to that other slide, sorry, not informative. Back to my program. Yes, while American settlement pressed westward along rivers like the Ohio, the Hudson, the Potomac, Canadian Western development was on the boundary waters like the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes. Canals built on either side of the border competed with rivers to provide easier navigation and improved access to commerce and settlement. After the Canadian Confederation in 1867, as Canadians moved into the Northwest Territories to establish a settlement at Red River, and on this slide, that would be the middle image of the river system going into the Northwest Territories. Yeah, no, towards Northwest Territories, sorry. As they traveled by rail through the United States and then north by riverboat, at numerous points along Canada-U.S. border, and this is one of them here, the north-south flowing rivers facilitated cross-border interaction, trade, and communications. The use of the railroad began to diminish the importance of rivers as highways. Yet before the Second Industrial Revolution, boundary waters provided some of the most crucial sites and spaces of interaction where ships and goods and peoples and ideas crossed and recrossed between the 2 countries. So here is, let's see, Washington State and Oregon going up the Columbia River into British Columbia. And then on this side here, this is Lake Champlain going to the Richelieu River. And this is Vermont into Quebec. So let's continue with the history. As early as 1783, settlers began constructing canals to control boat access along parts of the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes. By 1932, Canada had already linked Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, but the U.S. was still unsure of collaborating on a mutual project. By 1954, they were able to agree, and in 1959, they opened the co-constructed St. Lawrence Seaway system and power project connecting Montreal to Lake Erie. This slide shows the cities as well as, yes, the major cities that connect through this system. Economically, the project was a huge success for both countries, and it is still deemed an inland water engineering marvel. The Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River have been a major North American transportation arteries since long before the U.S. or Canada achieved nationhood. Today, the integrated navigation system serves mariners and farmers, factory workers, and commercial interests from the western prairies to the eastern seaboard. This is a screenshot of a really fun website where each of these dots, they're different colors. So they're colored red or green or yellow, whatever they represent ships that have registered and are tagged with GPS. And this is a live, sorry, this is a screenshot, but this is a live website where you can click on the boat icon and see the name of the vessel. And when the page refreshes, you can see if they are underway. You can see that they've moved somewhat because this map relates to their GPS. Now it tracks all registered vessels and not just the ones used in commercial shipping. So you can see large pleasure vessels as well. So this is coming up the, here's Montreal, here's Quebec City, up the St. Lawrence River here, all of the traffic. Well, let's talk about commercial shipping. Because many of these little dots represent vessels that are part of the commercial shipping industry. Beginning in the 1840s, the Great Lakes became busy highways for moving wheat, corn, lumber, coal, and iron ore. Crops from Midwestern farms crossed the lakes to markets in the east. Lumber from the region's vast pine forests made Chicago the world's busiest lumber port in 1870. Iron ore from the region traveled east on ships that returned filled with coal from Pennsylvania. And to this day, iron ore makes up nearly half the cargo in the lakes. Virtually every commodity imaginable moves on the Great Lakes Seaway system. Annual commerce on the system exceeds 20 million net tons, and these are the dominant commodities: coal for power generation and the steel production, limestone for construction and steel industries, grain for overseas markets, general cargo such as iron and steel products and heavy machinery, cement, salt, stone, aggregates for agriculture and industry, and the iron ore for the steel industry. So one of these famous vessels carrying iron ore became famous because of its, it was involved in a disaster. It was in 1975, and this was the SS Edmund Fitzgerald. This is a real photograph of the Edmund Fitzgerald, obviously in the early 1970s because it perished in 1975. And on the right is a storm picture taken from the deck of a large ship, such as the same one Edmund Fitzgerald was. And it's the kind of storm you would have on Lake Superior, according to this picture taken in 2007. So just setting the scene there. So Edmund Fitzgerald was loaded with iron ore. And the reason it's considered famous is it was made well known in a Gordon Lightfoot song, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. So prior to her sinking in 1975, she was, for 17 years, considered a workhorse, setting seasonal hauling records, breaking her own previous speed records. It was a vessel where one of the captains liked to pipe music, outwardly piping music when they were through the intercom, when they were in locks, and making commentary over a loudspeaker about what a great vessel it was and her size and her record-breaking performance. So she was, this is a well-known vessel. So at the time, it was November, she was en route, let's see, hang on. Departed Superior, Wisconsin near Duluth and was headed to a steel mill near Detroit. And The storm was quite severe. This was November. It was hurricane force winds, and something happened with the force of the wave, the winds, something about the cargo shifting, and the boat had a structural problem and sank with just half an hour after the last transmission. And everyone thought if they had could have only continued for one more hour, they would have been out of the storm into a port, but that was not the case. And every November 10th, the day after the sinking, the Mariners Church in Detroit rings their church bells 29 times, commemorating each of the souls of the lost crew. Over time, the increase in shipping has brought invasive species into the lake that hitched a ride on incoming vessels, and these have caused serious concerns for decades. At least 85 invasive aquatic species have been cited in the river itself, and about 180 non-native and invasive species exist in the Great Lakes. This is a picture of the zebra mussel, and the problem is shown on the left, where it completely clogged up this pipe that's meant to flow water through it. Sorry for the blurry slide. Despite the complexity of the problems that go along with sharing a long border, 150 treaties in the past 50 years show that sharing water, managing water, and resolving water disputes can be handled diplomatically. Nations value these agreements because they make international relations over water issues more stable and predictable. Water rights have been an important issue in the relationship between Canada and the U.S. since the Revolutionary War. The 1783 Treaty of Peace between Great Britain, now Canada, and the U.S. recognized that each country had jurisdiction over waters on its own side of the border. And during the following century, Great Britain and the United States concluded several treaties with provisions relating to the use of water flowing along or across the boundary, particularly for navigation. And these included 1794 Jay Treaty, 1817 Rush-Bagot Treaty Agreement, and the 1842 Webster-Ashburton Treaty, and 1846 Northwest Boundary Treaty, two more, 1854 Reciprocity Agreement, and the 1871 Treaty of Washington. Just trying to illustrate how far back in time and how many. By 1896, the then Canadian government was interested in appointing an international commission to regulate international streams for irrigation purposes. The US responded, and both governments established an International Waterway Commission operating from 1905 to 1913. This is important because what is fair? If both countries want to use the water, they agree to have an impartial commission to settle and discuss, and that makes it fair. That's what they did. That agreement was followed by the International Boundary Waters Treaty Act, prohibiting removal of water from boundary water basins. This is just a short list of the treaties and agreements spanning 240 years, from 1783 to the present. And these and many others are continuously in effect to guide our mutual use and caretaking of the Great Lakes and watershed, and all the other elements of our shared environment on the US-Canada border. We are treaty people. We are living with treaties and agreements right now. And for continued success, treaties and agreements will guide us in future generations. Oh, another blurry slide, sorry. In 1912, the treaty then established an international joint commission to help the two countries carry out for the provisions. And this joint commissions is comprised of 3 commissioners from the US and 3 commissioners from Canada. And they collaboratively work independently of business or political interests to resolve issues and make policy. So this is representing a modern website of an organization that's been in effect since 1913. They're tasked with water levels and flows, water quality, Great Lakes water quality, air quality, international watersheds initiatives, climate change, all in the transboundary waters. Okay, so we've mentioned commercial shipping, invasive species, treaties and agreements, and let's cycle back to the 40 million people whose source of water is the Great Lakes and watershed. For them, water quality is of primary importance. Now, the following data, and this is, I'll just bring up one of the better slides there. Okay, has to do with these next several slides. Sorry, is from the Great Lakes Environmental Assessment and Mapping Project, which had 20 American and Canadian researchers and environmentalists produce the data for these maps to illustrate the cumulative impact of human activity across the Great Lakes. For 3 years, the scientists analyzed and weighted and plotted and merged 34 environmental stressors, including various effects of residential, commercial, and industrial development, crisscrossing shipping lanes, and invasive species and climate change. So here we go. So this one is about the tributary dams. So this represents reducing water flow with hydropower damming, which also makes for concentrations of pollutants. This represents reduced ice cover. Ice cover on the Great Lakes has decreased by more than 71% during the past 40 years. When ice cover melts earlier in the spring, water temperatures are likely to be higher through the year. This represents the zebra and the quagga mussels. You can see which lakes they are primarily invasive to. These highly invasive species have colonized all 5 of the Great Lakes, although it doesn't really show it in Lake Superior, but let's say it is. The zebra mussels first appeared north of Lake Erie in 1986, having come from the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. The quagga mussels came to Lake Erie in 1989 from the Dnieper River drainage of the Ukraine. Phosphorus loading indicates high phosphorus levels in the Great Lakes as a result of agriculture and municipal runoff. The results increase algae growth, which leads to hypoxia, which is oxygen depletion, which affects plants and fish and other lake-dwelling organisms. PCB. Can't remember exactly what those initials stand for, but it's a kind of plastic. PCB sediments are indicated by this map. Now, PCBs have not been manufactured and imported to North America since the 1980s, but the effects of these highly toxic compounds that were used in coolants and insulating fluids in transformers and capacitors and in electric motors are still present from their decades of use prior to 1980. And this is another area of concern for a lot of people, which this is representing all the pipelines. This is a map of the pipelines that in the upper left-hand corner, here's my marker here, are the, in Alberta are the tar sands. And the tar sands is sandy soil drenched with oil, which is named bitumen, and it's extracted and piped out to oil refineries. So the oil refineries are located throughout the United States, and also they want to build one in British Columbia. But here we are with the pipelines, and these are actual pipe lines, but they go through the near and next to the Great Lakes. And another big concern is for the bitumen to be shipped on vessels through the Great Lakes. The number one problem with this kind of oil is that it's very different from the oil from, let's say, the Exxon Valdez spill. That oil floated and could be burned and could be scooped up. The bitumen, when it leaks into anything, any kind of water, groundwater, or even if it's in near a stream, it sinks. It sinks and dissipates. It's really, really hard to gather and collect and clean up. So next slide here. This was a book that is the subtitle of the title is Border Flows, and the subtitle is A Century of the Canadian-American Water Relationship. This is a book of scholarly essays, well researched, that you can download from the publisher. And so you can get this book for free, and I'll show you how to do that just now. No, I'll do that in a minute. Sorry, thank you. Oh, here, I'm showing you now. Sorry. Yes, you go to the press.ucalgary.ca, and then you search for Border Flows, and they'll tell you how you buy it and how much it costs. But look, scroll down, free PDF. There it is, every chapter. So to conclude as to how to use all this variety of information, I've put it down in a unit, an IDM style unit, with the compelling question being, what would North America be like without the Great Lakes? Sorry. And the secondary questions being, why are the Great Lakes so great? And are the Great Lakes more important for transportation, for shipping, for power generation, for recreation, or for providing drinking water? And the third supporting question, when two countries want the same thing, as in we want the water, how do you determine what is fair? This is something I'm happy to send anyone who would like to have this. Here is my email address, my name and affiliation, and I'm happy to also send you a list of other resources. As I was preparing this, I came up with a number of good resources that would also help to go further with the IDM. So here's the big book. I downloaded it, printed it out. It's a pretty big book. And I'm going to conclude right now and say thank you very much for attending. And we will be in communication if you'd like to email me at arnson@maine.edu.